Okay, right, I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Hello, everybody out there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Mike Bresnan. I've got a couple of hellos there, so I'm guessing that you can hear me and that you can hear me okay. Great, thank you. There's 58 of you, so no need for everybody to say hello. And thanks for the confirmation that you can hear me. Okay, as I said, I'm Mike Bresnan. I'll be taking this particular session and using it really as an opportunity to help you prepare a little bit further for your case study assignment. If I can, no, I can't quite. Bear with me. Well, I just try to get my slides working. They don't seem to be working. Yes, they are. Okay. Right, just to give a brief overview of the session, I thought I'd start by just giving a presentation about the assignment. I'm hoping, of course, and expecting that many of you will have read the case study guidelines that are posted up on Blackboard. If you haven't, then there's an opportunity to be able to read them maybe as we go along, but certainly after this session. What I'll be doing is saying a little bit about, or elaborating quite a bit upon the points raised in those guidelines. With regard to any other aspects we can cover, there should be plenty of time at the end to pick up any questions that you may have regarding the course as a whole. I'll pause at various points during the presentation to take questions and comments. Excuse me. At the end, there's a general Q&A session. So I'll be focusing more upon the assignment, and I think that'll be the thing that is particularly forefront in your minds at the moment. And at the end of the session, we can talk more generally about any aspects of the course so far that you'd like to. Obviously, we're particularly focusing at the moment upon the OB parts of the course. And can I increase my mic volume? I'm afraid I have tried to do that. What I'll do is I'll increase my closeness to the microphone. Hopefully that will help pick up. Okay, someone's saying it's loud enough. Great, thank you. Okay, first of all, an overview of the assessment for the course. Just a reminder that your assignment constitutes 40% and is based upon the Pluto Telecommunications case study. I'll go through that in a moment. And the exam, which I won't say anything about at the moment, is 60%. I'll say a little bit about, what about the workshop, someone's asking? Forget the workshop just at the moment. We'll come back to that at the end. And also we'll come back to the issue with regard to workshop presentations at the end. Your assessment is based 40% on this assignment and 60% on the exam. More about that later. Okay, if we can move, I can try to move on the slides. I'm trying to, I'm not quite sure why this isn't working. There we go. Just to remind you, your assignment is to, based upon the Pluto Telecommunications case study, which you'll find in the Corbett text. And the question is there, and the requirements, basic requirements, are there as well. I'm looking for a 2,500 word case study, plus or minus 10%, which would exclude references and figures and tables. There's no need to include those in the word count. And using the proper Harvard system of referencing. Those are the basic requirements. Keep within the word limit. Yes, it is correct that 10% of 2,500 would take you to 2,750. Someone's very hot on the maths out there. Well done. The format of the case study and where it equates to the particular marks that are being assigned, I've tried to signal up here. If you look at the case study guidelines, you'll find right at the end this breakdown of marks in terms of the various parts of the case study. Now, I expect you to use this general format and obviously to balance the work that you do in order to meet the requirements and to meet this balance of marks. So as you can see from this, there is very little mark attached to identifying problems and recommendations, not much in terms of plans of action, but an awful lot of emphasis placed upon your analysis of the case study. Someone's asked whether recommendation and action plan are not the same concept. No, they're not. We're not quite there yet. Please bear with me. I'll go through these stages one by one and pick up questions as we go along. So there's an awful amount of emphasis upon your analysis of the case study. And that's the particular part where you bring in theories, concepts, ideas in order to analyze the case. That's where you're making most of your marks. A bit more about that in a moment. As I said, I'll go through each of these steps one by one. I've put in at the bottom there about 5% for style presentation. And it's important, of course, that you present it well and that you follow this basic format. But style is not everything. We're really focusing here upon content. But of course, there are certain general requirements of style we would expect. Someone's asked, does the essay have to have these sections named specifically? Well, I would recommend strongly that you do that. It shows a very clear structure and it shows how you're responding to the need to format it correctly. Okay, one by one, let's go through these these particular sections. First one is in terms of identifying the problem. The key thing here is to keep it very short and very sweet. In the past, people have gone on endlessly identifying problems. This is about bringing out the essence of the problem that you're then going to analyze in some depth in the important part of the session. Someone's asked again, are we going to be able to download these slides? The answer is yes, they'll be available after the session to download, as indeed will be the verbal record of the session. Okay, I've cross-referenced here the case study guidelines. So the writing actually starts with step 3. There's no need for you to summarize the case. Let's assume that we know what's in the case, that I know what's in the case, or that Mark knows what's in the case, and just identify the main PMO problem areas. As I said in the past, people have made the mistake of spending half of the essay or half of the assignment listing out problem after problem. That's not the name of the game. It's to pick out the essence of the problems. So you need to show very briefly how these problems relate to the business environment and the problems facing the company. So set the scene in a certain way, but don't go into great detail and depth about this. Keep it short and sweet. And remember, this is a PMO assignment. This is not really asking you to analyze the marketing strategy of the company or its balance sheet or its cost structure. Those are important aspects that are covered in other courses, and if it was an integrated case, that's what we'd expect to see. But it's not, it's a PMO assignment. So we're really focusing on the people management issues, and consequently you need to focus on those, specifically the OP, people management aspects. Okay, I won't pause just there. I will pause after this so that you can pick up any questions. But looking at the analysis part, this is really the important part of the assignment. What we're looking for here is for you to, first of all, follow the guidelines that we've set out, the case study guidelines, and I've tried to summarize here. It's about using the concepts and models as a toolkit in order to analyze the case. We're not looking for you to go into depth explaining each. Oh, someone's just noted there's a camera icon on the top right of the, and then left a blank. I think what that is trying to indicate is that there is, yeah, well, I can't quite follow the technicalities. Someone's given some technical guidance as I go along as to how you might access these slides. And as I'm giving the presentation as well, it's a little bit more difficult for me to shift to that. I'm hoping that people can work out how to access the slides from the screenshot. If not, as I said, they'll be available afterwards, and you can supplement the slides with the notes that you make now. Incidentally, you will find these points all in the case study guidelines. These are just summary bullet points that I've taken from those. First of all, use the concepts and models as a toolbox. So I'm not expecting you to present a great deal of description and explanation of models and theories in their entirety. You should blend them in to your analysis of the case and use multiple models to be able to triangulate. That means get a different perspective on the same problem. Too often when we're reading case studies, we come across, for example, in the realm of culture, the use, or managing change, the use of one framework to analyze the case. Well, what you should be aware of by now is that all frameworks and models in OB have their strengths, but also have their limitations. So if you're going to have a thorough analysis of any particular aspect of a case, then you need to use multiple models, maybe 2 or 3, just to get a wider, a more complete view of the same kind of issue. So understanding culture, bring in 2 or 3 models that enable you to understand the culture or the subcultures within the company, and there's an obvious clue there. Don't think of this as an exercise in outlining every detail of every model and then trying to apply it to the case, and make sure that you integrate the case material, the case evidence, with the theory as well. So use the theory selectively as you're going through to get a handle on the case, and then bring in other theories and models, again, selectively, to confirm and to validate what you're particularly looking at. Someone's asking a little bit about reading at the moment. I'll come back to that when I get to points about the literature. Second thing is, analysis is not just conjecture or personal belief. We've got to the literature now. So you need to support your evidence sources from the literature. Please try and keep with me rather than ahead of me. I know I might be going a little bit slow for some people, but I will get to these bullet points. Okay, the literature refers to the readings in the textbook. Yes, it does. And someone's asking, which are the focus readings, textbook chapters? Well, that should be obvious from the study guide, because in the study guide we highlight which particular chapters and which particular readings are relevant to which particular thematic area. So your reading should be fairly targeted, but we're not going to be more targeted than that. Your challenge is to explore the literature you're guided to and select out the relevant and appropriate bits. So the literature base is fairly open to you to do that. Now you can address the case study by reference to the study guide and the text and the guided readings that we've given you. But of course, this is a subject which encourages you to read around the subject, and those who do read around the subject and bring in further references and further ideas from the text, from the study guide as a starting point, are obviously, that's going to be appreciated in the ways in which the piece is marked, because it's going to be showing that you're searching around for a wide way of trying to understand the particular problems. Someone just asked if it's okay to include concept from my previous marketing module. Well, as I said, this isn't a PMO assignment, so it's unlikely that because it's about marketing, to be of direct relevance to the examination of PMO issues. And that means if you do include it, okay, it might be a good point, but it's also crowding out your opportunities of really getting down to analysing the people issues in this. If you're analysing marketing issues instead of people management issues, then you're doing the wrong thing. If you're managing to draw upon marketing literature which has a very strong people management aspect to it, then that might be good, but it might not be the kind of in-depth literature that you should really be drawing on. So you should really be looking at the PMO literature. And as I said, if you can draw upon a wider literature base, that's great. If not, we realize there are constraints on what you're able to access, then draw thoroughly upon the literature that we are guiding you to in the textbook, study guide, and guided readings. So it's about developing, if you like, an informed view based upon the literature we've guided you to, and showing that you're using the theory, the concepts, the models in order to get a good handle on the case. This is not just about using personal beliefs or personal experiences, but blending those in with the guided reading you have to show a good connection between theory and practice. There seems to be a bit of a conversation going on about how the concept of CAM was used in the matrix proposal. No idea what that refers to. If you can use it properly to address people management issues, then that's fine, but I suspect it's not that well focused upon the needs in this case. Someone's asking, can I also include HR in the organogram, even though it is not mentioned anywhere? Well, again, if it's something that works in this particular case and it's evidence of a wider reading being brought in, then yes, but I would be very careful about these things because they do suggest you're moving into different territory. This is an OB assignment as part of the PMO course. Patrick has asked, do the uni like CIPD research on PMO, is it good reference as a source? Well, yes, it can be, but again, bear in mind that it's often used in support of HR and industrial relations ideas. So it may be a little tangential, but CIPD research is often considered a good and appropriate people management source. Muhyiddin, incidentally, if you hear loads of clicks, that's me clicking through, is asked, Muhyiddin is making statements. Muhyiddin's saying quite a lot. Thanks for your contributions, Muhyiddin, but you're actually finishing them before I get a chance to respond to them. Patrick, back again, thanks. Okay, lots of mutual thanks being shared here. That's good. Okay, analysis is not just description. This is really quite important if you want to be getting good marks on this assignment, as are all these points, but this is quite an important one. There can be a tendency to think, right, let's take this cultural framework and let's someone's lost audio. I hope that's not everybody. Beverly has lost audio. Beverly has a technical problem, so can't hear me. Other people are saying can hear okay, so I guess that's just Beverly's system is down. Okay, analysis is not just description. What we quite often see in PMOs is, for example, taking a cultural framework and then describing the case so that it's classifying it in a certain way. Now that's useful. It's useful to say, for example, what type of culture or subcultures might be being observed at the case study, or what kind of motivational factors might be in play in the case study. It's a useful starting point, but that's really what it is, a useful starting point. What you need to do then is to go beyond classifying what you found and then judging it just purely in those terms, because it's descriptively one thing or the other. What we really like to see is some use of those ideas and that classification to go a little bit further. So, for example, you might describe the structure as one type of structure. Okay, that's fine, but is it an appropriate type of structure? Does it fit the environmental circumstances? Does it deal effectively with any kind of integration requirements that are the result of differentiation that's occurred? And again, that's another big clue. So you might, it's important to go beyond the basics of classification and use your conceptualization of the case to go beyond just simply identifying what you found and then judging it. If you can identify that and then see whether it matches the circumstances, that's a step towards the in-depth analysis that we're really looking for. And finally, you need to make choices and be selective. You can't cover everything. There are various things that should obviously crop up from looking at this case. Motivational differences clearly crop up. Cultural differences, structural aspects are things that come to the fore. And clearly one could describe any change that might be engineered as leading to management of change issues. So all four parts of the OB course could be of relevance here. And your challenge there is really to be selective in how you look at it and what you choose to look at. But in doing so, making sure that you choose a sufficient breadth of areas to focus in on and complement that with depth of analysis. Now that means you can't cover everything. If you're triangulating your view, you can't cover every model and theory and idea. And you certainly can't describe those in any great detail, but you can selectively bring out key points from theories, models, and frameworks, and triangulate a few of those to get a good handle on each thematic area. And a good analysis will do that. We'll make good choices, we'll be selective, but at the same time be able to show a reasonably broad coverage and good depth of analysis. Now that's a challenge, and the challenge is really in your ballpark. That's what you need to be doing in order to achieve good marks. Okay, I think Beverly's plugged back in. Welcome back, Beverly. Hope you can hear me. Someone's asked, be selective means we should cover all the major problems in this company. Right, right, in the sense that there are there are the marketing finance issues, there's all sorts of other issues that are not people management issues. So no, you don't cover those. Those are, you can do that at your leisure for your marketing course or your finance course. Jevon asks, can you elaborate what it means to triangulate? Yes, I can. It's a good question. Triangulation is taken from the field of surveying, where surveyors stick up these tripod-based equipment, and they measure the height of something by triangulating from 3 points. So they measure the height of mountains, for example. Triangulation in these terms means taking different frameworks and viewing the problem from different positions to get a more complete understanding of that problem. So, for example, you could take perhaps 2 different ideas about structural culture, say, for example, Handy's framework, and something else, for example, Robbins' framework on culture, and then you can classify the culture in different ways, see if they match up. They're very different frameworks, they're doing different things, but if you use those 2, for example, to identify the types of culture that you're getting there, then a triangulation should give you a much more validated view of what you're actually seeing there. So that's what we mean by triangulation, getting different perspectives on the same problem. Same with, for example, motivation theories. If you take 2 or 3 different models, you should come up with, roughly speaking, a coherent position on aspects of motivation that are and aren't being covered. That's triangulation. If you do that well, you get a good complete picture. I'm pausing here, obviously, to take some questions. Sunil has asked the same question, so I won't repeat what I've just said, because I hope that clarified it. Julia asks, oh, Julia has answered for me. Thank you, Julia. I just elaborated on Julia's pithy response. Like a cell phone signal tracking, and a nice smiley face from Karim. Yes, it is. Very technical answer, but again, technically correct. Spencer asks, if you identified more than one PMO issue, do we focus on one or link them all? Try to link them all. I'll come back to that when I talk about your recommendations. But obviously what we're looking at here is an integrated analysis. One of the things that has happened in the past is that people have tended to take each problem and then just treat them in isolation as though they're not connected. The aim of the case study approach here is to take a holistic view, to take a view which emphasizes the interconnections between the problem areas. So, for example, motivational issues are likely to be connected with subcultural differences. And again, that's a bit of a clue. So try in your analysis to obviously identify and analyze key aspects distinctly, but also with a view to how they're connected together. Again, a good case study analysis and a good case study as a whole will be a very coherent, integrated piece of work. So good question. Thank you for that, was it Spencer? Yes, it was. Sunil, I'm flicking through. Many of these are thank you messages, which is great. I'm flicking through to the questions. Patrick McBride says that Veronica Sang sounds like our COO. I suspect Veronica Sang sounds like many people's COOs, so that's maybe a shared experience. Any further points or questions that people want to raise on the analysis stage? As I said, it is the most important stage. Let's pause slightly before I move on. Get typing those questions in. How much words? How much words? How many words? I assume you mean how many words, and this is from Julia, how many words for this section, I was just about to say, which she has just clarified. Thank you, Julia. Bear in mind that I'm allocating here, roughly speaking, 55% of the marks. So it's the majority of the assignment. You need to allow for other aspects of the case study assignment too, of course, but it's going to be a hefty chunk of the piece. If you're, again, in the past, I've marked assignments where it's been surprisingly brief, and it certainly hasn't come anywhere near representing 55% of the words. But if you take that as a rough indication, that should give you a rough indication of where to go to. If in doubt, elaborate a bit more in your analysis. It's an important part. It's where a lot of the marks come. But of course, if you do elaborate, don't make the other parts far too brief. One thing that does often happen is people spend too much time outlining problems, too much time talking about action plans, because naturally we want to solve the problem, and perhaps even too much time exploring the recommendations. Those are very small parts of the overall mark, so they should get a correspondingly small amount of the words. Okay, Jevon, oh, hang on, there's a few questions come up here. Wow, there's lots of calculations. Following Julie's question, there's been all sorts of metrics applied. 55% of 2,500. Well, yes, I guess so. And then someone's elaborated on that. I'll let you do your own maths. And Vivek then talks about a more qualitative point. 3 divisions seem to have a few distinct issues. Should we focus separately and then take a holistic view from an organization point of view? That would be a good thing to do. This case study is one where it makes sense to drill down and to do some comparison and contrast across the 3 divisions. It makes sense to do that in this particular case. And they face very different situations. And I think not doing that really leaves you talking too generally about the culture of the organization. I've mentioned before subcultures. It should be pretty obvious there are differences there within the divisions that warrant some analysis and which will then track through into your alternatives and recommendations. Okay, Jevon, and then another quality. I'm skipping over the arithmetic calculations that people are making. You can do that at your leisure. Avoid redescribing means no need to repeat the problem identified. Yes, and I'll move on. Jevon again. Oh. So, e.g., sales couldn't find material of new product launch when customer inquire. It's obviously a point of evidence in the case which you would probably have mentioned when you're outlining the problems very briefly, and may be used as evidence, or maybe instead used as evidence when you're conducting an analysis. But again, don't get into big descriptions and don't go off on a tangent talking about describing the case. That would be what Jevon has put there is a redescription of the case. So leaving it at that is where you would have a problem. What you need to do is move beyond that particular problem, if you like, and analyze it in a bit more depth. What is that symptomatic of? In other words, Mohammed asks, yes, and says, I think this is a symptom of not underlying illness. Quite right, Mohammed. Thank you for that. Fanny says, should we do the analysis based on individual level, individual group or organization, etc., etc.? There are different ways of doing this. You can do it by thematic area, for example, structure, culture, motivation, whatever it might be. Or you can bring those together and perhaps do it by level. So you might, for example, conduct your departmental level analysis by talking about it in terms of different groups and different parts of the organization before or after looking at the organizational level analysis. Either way is fine, but there are different ways in which you can structure it. And I think importantly, some structuring is valuable there because it helps you organize the material better. So different levels of analysis, group, organization works well. So too does different thematic areas. And you might combine those in various ways. It's probably easier to start off with your level of analysis, group and organization, and then talk about the thematic areas within those. Muhyiddin asks, can I leave out the option of doing nothing? You can, but it's a logical thing to consider. Muhyiddin says, and just suggests 3 alternatives. Yes, you can. Vivek, sorry, there are another few thank yous here. Ying Zhu asks, can we use the theory not from the textbook to analysis? I guess what you mean there is you using other sources of theory and ideas. And again, yes, providing they meet the requirements of being good sources for an OB assignment within PMO, that's absolutely fine. And again, it shows you delving more widely into the reading. But again, make sure it's from PMO and OB relevant material. Okay, let me move to the next slide. I'd like to say a little bit about. Someone's mentioned 7S theory. That's a good question because, and it's Ying Zhu again. Now, what you need to watch out for things like this, and I think I cover this a little bit on the next slide, if I can get to the next slide. It's in this first point here. I'll tie it in with this first point here. The thing with the 7S approach, the Kinsey framework, and other kinds of frameworks like that, they can be quite useful for structuring purposes, but they provide their own off-the-shelf holistic solution. And what we really want to see from you here is for you to be not drawing upon off-the-shelf types of solution or off-the-shelf frameworks for analysis, but well-argued analyses of the case based upon the kind of literature that we're flagging up. Now, the 7S framework is a good example of something that is in that boundary between useful and off-the-shelf. And it depends a little bit how you use it. If you are able to use it as a framework for trying to get a handle on the various parts of the analysis and then going into depth in the analysis rather than just using it as a way of classifying problems, then that's fine as a starting point. If you, on the other hand, you, and also when it comes to recommendations, if you were to use it as a starting point to talk about alternatives, maybe that might be very useful as well. But the danger here is in using it as an off-the-shelf framework and set of solutions. There are plenty of others that come to mind here. For example, you could pick on something like total quality management as a framework. But if you haven't signaled that up as an issue beforehand, then it hangs very much in the air. It's not actually a solution to the problems you've analysed. So you need to be very, very careful about using pre-packaged off-the-shelf types of solution, either as a basis of your analysis or as your basis of the recommendations. We'd far rather see you thinking these things through than simply reaching for something and then slapping it on and seeing how it applies. It's in a sense, it's a kind of lazy approach to the case study. And you'll always find that case studies don't easily fit these kind of frameworks. And then the problem becomes you spend all your time either trying to fit the framework or trying to argue for its relevance despite the evidence. If someone's asking, William's asking, oh, hang on, let's keep questions here. People are asking about 7S. I think if you're not familiar with 7S, then you're none the wiser. You're not going to lose out here. Sunil is asking what is SM. William is saying, I'll leave that discussion for you to have on Blackboard. You can quite readily use Blackboard discussions for developing a shared awareness of these kind of things. What I'm trying to suggest here is, the very fact that people are asking about what these things are should give an indication that it's not what we're necessarily expecting to see. William's saying is, if off-the-shelf solutions are not recommended, should we avoid using any framework, even if they are from PMO? No, what I'm referring to here is off-the-shelf consultancy solutions, off-the-shelf package solutions that are part of the things that are researched within PMO, but not necessarily seen as part of the answer to questions in PMO. So I'm trying to steer you towards using frameworks and models that we are suggesting are useful, albeit with their limitations, and at the same time try to warn you off using things that you might have experienced used in your own company or in consultancy exercises or wherever it might be, but which don't necessarily have the research grounding that we would like to see in the use of these models. So how are alternatives different from recommendations? Well, your alternatives, I've tried to suggest here, Spencer's lost all sound at the moment. Let's hope they can get it back. Irfan is asked how are alternatives different from recommendations. Well, alternatives should be fairly integrated, should be generic rather than piecemeal. Again, avoid dealing with each problem area one by one. So if there are structural aspects, avoid just dealing with the structural problem. Structure, culture, motivation, managing change, these issues are interconnected, and your alternatives need to recognize that. So your alternatives should be generic. They should be holistic, not piecemeal. Dealing with, if you've got an alternative, you want to ask yourself the question, well, how well does it deal with the motivational as well as the structural issues I've just been analysing? And you should be able to evaluate it in those terms. If you can't, if it just deals with one aspect, then it's not really doing the right job. So think of the alternatives as being generic, not piecemeal. You might, for example, okay, someone's asking, Spencer's back. Welcome back, Spencer. You've replugged yourself back in. William's asking a question about the frameworks. I'll get back to that in a moment. What I was going to say about the alternatives, if I could get to the end of this, and then I'll pause for some questions about frameworks, alternatives, and so on. One of the things you might consider here is, if you like, thinking of these alternatives as cumulative. One obvious approach to thinking about alternatives is in considering whether behavioural change is enough. Some alternatives might be to do about ensuring better compliance or making sure the structure works, about changing behaviour, rather than delving deeper. into things like structural or cultural change. So you can almost look at alternatives in terms of the levels of depth of change they go to. Are they more surface-based behavioral change, or are they deeper? Are they shorter term, or are they longer term? Think of that as a way of putting together packages of change measures as one set of alternatives or several sets of alternatives. As I said, assess how well they deal with all aspects of the problem. So there should be an integrated, holistic alternative. And some will deal with some aspects of the problem better than others. So that's when you come to your recommendation, because you're choosing from alternatives where there is some possible degree of trade-off. None of them might be perfect. As I said, how do they deal with short and long-term aspects? So you might have a structural fix, but does that deal with the emerging nature and change within the environment the company is facing in the longer term? And last but not least, to go back to the questions raised before, it's useful to consider what happens if you do nothing. In a sense, the analysis is logically incomplete. The reference there is to a Star Trek episode, I think, or it might have been one of the movies. You might be able to share your knowledge of this on the discussion board. Mr. Spock, the Star Trek is faced, or the Enterprise is faced, with a creature coming towards it from space which destroys anything in its path. And the natural response there is to do something. And Spock's logical reasoning, it's actually a very different form of reasoning, is to do nothing, to respond by doing nothing. The creature passes through the ship, everyone's happy. It doesn't quite explain the fact that the engines are running, things are mobile, and so on. But anyway, I digress. Okay, let's get back to some of these questions and pause for some more. So William has asked, frameworks give me the sense that they are standard and not tailor-made for a particular situation, like the one in Pluto. No, they're not standard. I think you're missing the point of frameworks now. You need to really perhaps check on that. Frameworks are ways in which you can, for example, different types of culture, in the Handy and Harrison framework, is a way of trying to look at variation across cases or within cases according to different tendencies. They're not meant to suggest that there's one size that fits all, and they're not meant to produce standard solutions. They are ways of judging and assessing and evaluating and classifying cases in a little bit more detail. So think carefully about your understanding there of frameworks from literature. And it's the same applies, of course, to the 7S framework. You know, I'm at risk of talking about something that half of you don't know about, but it's a generalized framework developed by McKinsey that talks about people, structures, systems, technologies, and so on. But they all begin with S, of course. And the idea being that you need to understand management or change or cultural development as a whole by looking at the interrelationships between all of those things. That's effectively what it is. And it's in that sense, it's a useful starting point because it allows you to start to think of the different qualities of the organization within each. But it's not meant to suggest there's one pattern there that emerges from it. It's a way of using it as a broad framework to assess different types of firm. Can I adapt from the 6 types of structures from Morgan as my alternative from Morgan? Not quite sure what the reference is you're making there. It doesn't matter. But I suppose it might be a useful way of approaching things, providing you're able to present them as holistic solutions. So again, it goes back to the point that if you're putting a primacy on the structural side of things there, you need to make sure that your framework allows you to assess other things too. If it does that, fine. If it doesn't, you might want to think, is that biasing it too much in the direction of structural change? Is it, you know, have a look at the framework. If you can talk about other issues within that structural framework, then maybe it's useful. But you might find that it's not the only way forward. Sometimes people use management of change strategies here. But of course, again, that's only a partial response to the needs of the assignment. You need to be able to look at other aspects, it's not just about managing change. There are other issues there too. Okay, Fanny comes in with, we think of 5 alternatives and pick 2 of them as recommendation. Well, yeah, I can't judge on the basis of numbers of 5 alternatives, but in the past, people have done that and quite successfully. So perhaps that's the best way of answering that one. There are no absolute numbers of alternatives you should look at or alternatives you should pick. People have chosen 4, 5, 6 alternatives to look at, and then maybe chosen 1 or 2, sometimes more. Obviously, don't try to be too complex and elaborate here, because you've got a practical action plan to think of too. Sandy asks, so the alternatives are the starting point of solutions? Yes, they are. In the matrix recommendation, for instance, Muhyiddin, you're a bit obsessed by the CAM matrix thing. To address both customer focus and employee motivation and cultural alignment. Well, in which case, it might well be something that's very useful. My suspicion, though, is that it's going to be something that's going to be a rather more market-focused than organizational directed, and you need to be careful, therefore, you don't shift, if you do use it, you don't shift towards more of a marketing customer-focused based response, as you would with a marketing assignment. Rosette, can we draw from personal experience in our company, especially in the recommendations? Well, I think yes, but the danger there is that you use your personal experience as a template for the answer, and you need to bear in mind that your analysis is going to be stronger if you're sensitive to the needs and the requirements and the nature of this particular company. So you need to avoid simply saying, well, we've done this in our company, and this is how it works, and this is how we're going to apply it here, without it being clear that it actually does apply. Now, the danger here is that it's effectively going back to drawing upon an off-the-shelf solution. The difference here is it's an off-the-shelf solution from your own company rather than, say, a consultancy model or something like that. So again, be very, very careful about how you use that. And again, if it's not flagged up earlier, and then naturally follows from your analysis, it's going to be weak. And I've seen assignments like this before where there's been quite an interesting analysis, and then slapped on at the end is, well, this is what we did in our company, this is what the company therefore needs to do. And that could lead to a very poor integration of analysis and recommendations. Ala is asking, alternatives should be, I think that there's not too many P's in that word. I think it's supported maybe by theory. Yes, that's good. It's not the place here to introduce new theories or new ideas, but if there are elements of theory you can bring in to back up your assessment, because what you should be doing is evaluating these alternatives, then that's absolutely great. So it's not about bringing in new theories and ideas to reanalyze the case, but to support your evaluation of the alternatives. Yes, absolutely. That will strengthen the analytical part of your assignment, and therefore it will go down well with the markers. Kelvin says, alternative plus explain what happens when do nothing, and then says, or either or situation. I'm not quite sure how that route. I can't quite understand that question, so I'll pass it by, Kelvin. Sorry. Ken, from the point of view of the CEO, being told to do nothing in the face of what's become an obvious problem isn't going to seem like the right answer, especially if she commissioned a study. Quite right. But then you've also got to bear in mind the other side of the coin, that there is a kind of social realism that Ken picks up here, which is important, particularly in this sort of case, because if you think of one of the alternatives of being to sack the CEO or to retrain or redevelop them, you could ask yourself the question, how are you going to present that back to the CEO too? So Ken has a very good point, but it's actually more pertinent as a point when it comes to the idea that you're giving back recommendations. So you need to take on board the political reality of the situation you're in as doing the case study and giving recommendations, as Ken rightly points out. Interestingly enough, consultants are rarely brought in to do nothing. It's a part of a general thing that consultants can be used to validate CEO actions or to legitimize things that are done. There's a whole different set of ways in which consultants are used. And so the creation of something is often part of the selling point. This is going off the point a little bit, but it also, in response to Ken, a very good Spock-like consultant can create nothing out of something. I leave you to ponder on that. Fathi Qasim, can people write the questions in public to all, not only the instructor? That's why I'm reading them out, Kathy, and that's why I'm trying to repeat them, because they'll be captured on the audio record, and I'm trying to select them out as well, because otherwise everybody else would have to go through all the thank yous and hellos, as well as me. So I'm trying to be selective, and I'm trying to pick out the essence of the key questions. And I'm also trying to translate them when people use poll instead of points of view, etc., etc. And Patty says thanks, and thanks. You're welcome, Patty. Mohammed, does each alternative need to be offering a solution for all problems in the case, or each alternative could direct it towards one of the problems, and it is at the recommendations part where we pick the most appropriate amongst them? At the recommendations part, you certainly pick the most appropriate amongst them. But what I've tried to say previously in response to other points is that I suppose the answer to that is the first part. So each alternative does need to be offering solutions for all aspects of problems in the case, or it needs to be assessed more accurately. It needs to be assessed in terms of how well it does that. And as I said before, you don't want to be directing the alternatives, each alternative to each problem. They're supposed to be seen as an integrated whole. And back to the point that someone raised earlier, is that they are symptoms of an underlying set of causes. And it's those causes that the alternatives should be addressing. So it's a good question, Mohammed, but I think I've already answered it in trying to emphasize the holistic nature of the alternatives rather than the piecemeal nature of them. Kelvin asks, under alternative, what must be right about what happens if you do nothing? Well, I think I've also already answered that. It is it's your choice, but it is a useful exercise to assess what would happen if you did nothing. And I suppose the short answer is the problems would get worse in this particular case, and then you might want to outline what that would mean. Patrick asks, comments that some CEOs don't like change. Absolutely, it's a whole area of inquiry that you might want to explore through the discussion board, and maybe tied in with the discussion of managing change. But you don't want to get too much into that. I think those are relevant points with regard to the political reality here, but don't let that particular aspect of it dominate your alternatives. And Muhyiddin, you're really keen on this matrix stuff. I can absolutely tell. You're using project-based organization as one of the alternatives. Interesting. And this is based on matrix. I see the matrix structure being most effective in addressing most issues, such as facilitating interpersonal relationship. Oh, blimey, you've written an essay. Facilitating the interpersonal relationship across the functions, use of project managers to manage the client activities. I'll just say blah, blah, blah. That's okay. Because you're using it in ways that I'm not necessarily sure needs to be shared. I think you're effectively asking me to comment upon what you're doing there, and I can't really do that because that's kind of unfair to others. You also want to get a word in edgeways. You need to, and you've added in more as well. Yeah, Mahideen, we can't really do this on a one-to-one, I'm afraid. It sounds as though you're doing interesting things there with exploring things in the way in which you are. And I can't possibly comment on the detail of what you've sent through. I think the interesting suggestion there is about thinking of project-based organisation as one alternative. That's fine if you want to go that way. But again, you need to justify that in the light of how well it deals with problems in the case, not how well it conforms to a particular framework and set of ideas that you're bringing in from elsewhere. That's the key differential. And it applies to the 7S ideas earlier on. It's not just about conforming with an off-the-shelf set of ideas. It's about using those ideas to get a handle on how well you're dealing with the problems in this particular case. Sunil asks, we are finding difficulty understanding what is required by alternatives, I guess. I guess you are, because there seem to be a lot of questions about that. I'm trying to steer you in the direction of thinking about if you take the if you take the first of the italicized points in the middle bullet point there, that gives you a kind of clue as to if you start by thinking, well, what do you do if you do nothing? Well, think, well, what do you do if you do then something? What might that something be? Can you perhaps focus on trying to get the thing working as it is at the moment by adjusting behavior in some kind of way? Yeah. Evaluate that as a set of options. What might it mean, and what can you then do? If not, are there kind of cultural or structural changes you might need to do? Maybe structural changes first, but do they deal with all aspects of the problem? Or maybe you need to think about cultural change. So what I'm suggesting here is a kind of accumulating set of alternatives that go deeper in the way in which you approach things. And some of those will be more short-term based, others will be longer-term. I can't really go into more guidance on that without basically providing a very clear framework for alternatives. You need to be thinking these things through, and it's partly determined by the way in which you define the problems and analyze them earlier on. So that, again, there's no one solution to this case. There are different ways of approaching it. Leon agrees that it's difficult, but then talks about the agency problem. Again, it's back to the agency of the CEO. So there's a whole series of points being raised here. Again, it's an interesting issue, but it's not the whole issue when it comes to analysing the case. So please don't get distracted too much by the politics of it. It's something to mention. It's something to bear in mind. Patrick talks about alternative structures that can address cultural and communication difficulties. That might be a way forward in terms of structuring your alternatives. And we've already looked at that. Someone mentioned Morgan's structural types before. Sunil says, yes, but that can be under analysis as well. And absolutely. The point here is that your alternatives need to reflect what you've considered in your analysis. You don't want to be repeating things, but you need to be structuring things so that they match together. And okay, there's lots of conversation going on here. Are we addressing this case from the consultant position? Well, effectively, you are. So yes, you can do that, but again, don't get too worked up about that. Muhyiddin says you finished the assignment. Okay, you've asked all these questions about project organization, but you've now told me you finished it. Okay, great, good. Look forward to reading it. Okay. How long do we expect the session to last? Well, it's going on forever at the moment. We've got till 11:30, but we're probably likely to finish slightly before then. Okay, I'm just skimming through a lot of comments. Someone says, I'm thinking of using Kotler's outline as a way of carrying out the structural change in my plan of actions, but this model is not well, I think explained is the word you tried to type there. Or it's there in the reading. If you can follow through in the further reading, you will come across it in a great deal more detail. So if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine, and I would encourage you to do that. Let me move to recommendations and plan of action very quickly. Recommendations, keep it very short and sweet, and again, don't forget both the short and the long term. And the plan of action, again, in the past, people spend a long time talking about the plan of action. So it's only 10% of the mark maximum. So avoid taking too long on this or including things that should have appeared earlier in the analysis. So for example, that structural framework that someone was mentioning just a moment ago, it's got to be signaled up in the analysis if you're going to be talking about it here. Same with the management of change issues. Although this is a good place to think about how you might use some management of change aspects, and also some people raise questions about the politics and the consultant-CEO relationship here. Yeah, that's an obvious point to kind of consider that, or show that you've considered that at this point here too. But bear in mind, it's only 10% of the mark. Okay, I'll pause there. I'm sorry, I'll go back on that just to make sure I've addressed any final questions that are coming through. They've come in thick and fast. Someone said laugh out loud. I don't know what that's in relation to. I don't remember telling too many jokes. Oops. Apologies, I've just clicked the wrong thing. Let me just resume where I was. There we go. Okay, Muhyiddin says, Kotler's outline is not well. Kotler's outline. Kotler's outline is from marketing management, I think. Maybe the wrong outline. Anyway, I can't really. It's a marketing. There is work by Kotter that is very relevant to understanding management of change. So I'd refer you to that in the PMO materials. If you're referring to Kotler's ideas on marketing management, that's not my course. You need to, and it's not really the place for me to explain it. So I'm afraid I can't help there. William's asking, how many words should we use for the alternative section? If we have to go through the pros, cons, and risks for each alternative, I'm afraid that 2,500 words in total may not be enough. Again, you've got to be succinct in what you do here, and that's why it's not about reintroducing lots of models and theories here at this point. You need to be selective, and you need to be succinct, and you need to be relatively short. The alternatives give you 20%, so that's the area where there is space for some evaluation, and someone's going to calculate this, I'm sure, but 20% of 2,500 is going to be 500 words, which should give you plenty to be going on here, without getting into too much detail and without going too much into Kotler's marketing management and areas like that, which you don't necessarily need to go into. Right, Muhyiddin's asking lots of things and now says explain, so I'm hoping that's some closure for Muhyiddin, hopefully. Leon is saying, got it, thanks. I'm hoping you're speaking on behalf of several others as well. And Jevon is asking, so recommendations is only for the alternative, not for the analysis. recommendation is basically your choice. So you need to be, it's a simple statement of choice. So that's where you can save a little bit of your words. I mean, 5%, if you do the calculation, is going to be 125 words. I'm sure you can say what you need to say about the recommendation in less than 125 words. Meridian, oh no, there's no closure for Meridian, he's back again. Can I put the plan of actions in table instead of in the text? Oh, that would be a good way of saving some text, but keep the table short. Most people don't prefer not to do that, and it can. It's your choice. If you do that, that is one way of saving some space. Yes. Can you go back to recommendations slide for a second? Oops. Yes, I can. Are you going to tell me why I've done that? This is Earthman. Okay, Earthman, I'm waiting for your right. Moody. It's Cotter you're talking about. Okay, the references are in the study materials, so you should be able to follow those through. I think there's actually reference to the original article. Vikas is asking, is the plan of action in effect the conclusion? Well, in a sense it is. It's the way you would tie it up. You don't need a separate conclusion, in other words. No need to say sorry, Mahudin. I'm teasing you. Okay, it is Cotter. Yep, not Kotler. Good. I'm glad you're not getting into marketing management. Any need for introduction? Someone's asking. No, I think I've already addressed that. There's no need for a summary introduction. It goes back to one of the earlier slides when I spoke about starting at step 3 in the writing. William Beverly is saying, I would have said the recommendation is the conclusion. The plan is more about next. Well, yeah, I guess it is in a sense. Yeah. Because it's a case study format, then it doesn't follow those normal concluding section requirements. So, in a sense, you're finishing it off in a sense in both parts. What I will say about that is no one's come unstuck before by signaling up their ending in the wrong place, so don't worry too much about that. Vikas, okay, Vikas, no. Okay, Mohammed says, Vikas, plan of action. I think it is a listing of what needs to be done, who'll be doing it, time frame, implications, both positive and negative. In any, yes, it is. Yeah. Irfan says, oh, you just wanted me to go back to the slide. Okay. Right. Can I change back to the plan of actions? Is this just me just swinging backwards and forwards so people can make notes? You lazy thing. Okay. Right. Okay, that's Jevan has asked me to do that. Vikas. Okay, it's fine. Whoa. Sorry, I keep on getting my slides switched off for some reason. Apologies for that. Okay. Konstantinos is asking, apart from structure, culture, motivation, management, change, are there any other aspects, areas that may consider regarding management? Well, by motivation, I'm talking about the whole area of job design and work organization. So there may be aspects for that to conceive more broadly. You've outlined that it can relate to any part of the course. So the answer is yes and no. For one example, you could, I mean, it is possible, for example, to think of leadership issues, but we don't cover that in the course materials. I'd advise you not to go into that area. You don't need to. You can cover as much as you need to by maybe talking about leadership more generally with regard to culture, but you don't need to conduct an analysis of leadership. By all means mention it, but the group dynamics, these are areas that could be explored, but I'm not expecting to see because we don't cover them in course material. However, another one. You'll see from the text there are whole areas which, but we're not directing you to those areas, so don't consider them in any sense important areas for you to look at. Okay, Muhyiddin was a little concerned that it might be seen as listing plan of actions in a table as a way of getting word around the word limit. I think with plan of actions, I don't mind so much about that. If you can do that, that's absolutely fine. It does lend itself to that. As I said, other people find it better to explain the plan of actions. I leave that entirely up to you. If it does go in a table, it takes out of the word count. But if you're obviously putting in loads and loads of text in a table, we will see through that. It's used tables to explain, not to explain things, but to include much more concise, very short statements. If you're using tables more than that, obviously we'll be seeing through and it will be treated as text. Okay, I think someone's asking about plan of action. We can talk about change management. We'll have to have the slide that's up says that, so by all means. Which was not mentioned earlier in the analysis. Well, of course, if change management is mentioned here, then there should be some reason as to why it should be mentioned here. One of those reasons would be that it was handled badly in the first instance, in which case it would form part of the backdrop analysis, in which case there would be an inevitable connection. Another would be that any of the alternatives would involve some change, and therefore there would be an argument for needing to consider change management that would come from the alternatives themselves. So either way, it has to feed from or follow on from another aspect. Okay, Konstantinos, Javan. Okay, I'm going to suggest we just stop there with the questions because we just need to tie up. We're getting towards the end, and I'm conscious of the fact that we haven't had any time at all to talk about other aspects of the course. Let me just, first of all, before we finish with the last 10 minutes of any questions, any further questions, either about the assessment or about the course more generally, let me just emphasize once again that the assessment is 40% based upon this case study and 60% on the exam. I did post something up about ignoring references in the study guide to an HRM assessed workshop presentation because it no longer applies this particular year. We've changed the method of assessment. Previously, it was split differently and included an assessed presentation at the workshop. You'll still be doing workshop presentations, or for those who don't attend, there will be an extra piece of work they'll be expected to do to compensate, and they will have to pass that. So there will still be presentations at the workshop, but they will be non-assessed. And any references in the study guide to workshop presentations, the content of the workshop presentation is still the same, but it won't count towards your assessment. So it'll be a more informal based presentation. Okay, so that's just really to repeat what I've already set up there on Blackboard. Okay, finally, just to tie up the last 5 or so minutes, let me just see if there's any questions that have come through, but then to open it up to any other questions. I'm tracking back to where I last addressed a question. Okay, Muhyiddin is saying, I used the table for n-step change management that's based upon Cotter's work in my plan of action. So that's what he's referring to. Sounds perfectly okay. Now, there's a difference between using it and using it well, Muhyiddin, but let's assume you used it well. Okay, no more guidance on that one. Muhyiddin's asking about the workshop. You're asking lots of questions, Muhyiddin. You're dominating the questions. Okay, I think I've just addressed the question about the workshop. As I said, there's no workshop formal assessment as there was, so ignore what it says in the study guide about that. The welcome documents are up to date and refer to my announcement on Blackboard, just to make absolutely sure about that. But it's 40% on the assignment, 60% on the exam. Please don't let me say it again. That's the assignment, assessment rather. Albert saying awareness campaign in change management and rehearsals if required. Where does this action plan fit? Oh, I think where do you, I guess you're asking where does this fit? Well, obviously it might well fit in the plan of action, but of course it would follow on from some prior analysis somewhere, either in the alternatives or in the analysis itself, which flags up that awareness or lack of awareness is an issue, or that change management needs to be reversed. So there would be some logic leading to that, rather than just throwing it in as an essential component. In other words, you need to argue the case, rather than just say this is what's going to happen. William asked for a list of irrelevant references. No, I can't provide a list of irrelevant references because that would take forever, logically. Okay, Muhyiddin again. There is a paradox in the workshop with no assessments. There is no assessments, but there is lots of effective exam preparation, so you should regard it as still very important. Irfan, any minimum number of references required for the assignment? Well, no. No minimum number, no maximum number. You obviously, as I said, we value you drawing upon a range of literature. Sometimes when we just see at the end study guide and textbook, that's rather a limited range of references to refer to. There's guided reading we've given you, and there are follow-on references which we'd hope that you explored. And other texts you might have consulted to get a wider picture. So there's no minimum number of references. Clearly, the text and the study guide are essential, but you should really go beyond that at this level. Julia, any recommended readings for the assignment? Again, try to flag up where your reading should start and hopefully start from and extend into. Muhyiddin is asking, are you saying that we will only focus on Unit 1, not Unit 2? For this case study assignment, yes. For the exam and the workshop work, no. The exam will be more balanced towards HRM concept. More about that at the workshop. We'll tell you much more about that at the workshop. So don't worry about the exam at the moment. There is an opportunity for us to pick up on that later. And the way the assessment is balanced, there will be probably a little bit more balance on the AV side, but that will be compensated for in the exam. So this case study is OB. That's the clear message that needs to be got across. Exam, I won't take questions about exam at the moment. Some people are asking about the exam. We'll address that nearer in time. This is And there will be a second online tutorial which will also delve a little bit more into more detail about exam preparation. So there's plenty of opportunity to talk about the exam. Someone's asked about what the workshop will focus upon. Again, more about that in due course, but the workshop is half OB and half HRM. So we will be looking at both parts of the course then. Vidya has asked about, needs some help with the recommended articles for the assignment. Any ideas? Well, I've got lots of ideas, but I'm not going to share them too explicitly. Again, I think I've mentioned enough about starting with the course materials you have and the guided and recommended reading, and then work beyond that, depending upon which thematic areas you focus your attention on. If it's all, there's a limit to how much reading you can do, and obviously we recognise that, and we take that into account. But do try and explore a little bit beyond the basic text and study guide. Okay, there's a few questions cropping up here about the exam, and as I said, I'll pass on those. What I will do, people are asking whether it's closed or open book. I will say though, and we'll talk about this later, it is a closed book exam. So that's one thing you need to know. More detail in due course, but it's a closed book exam. I think it says that in the welcome document. William, okay, I'm thinking through here. Muhyiddin is thank you, Muhyiddin, for saying that you're finding this the most interesting part of the program. We do too, he or she, I'm not sure, I think it's he is booking a flight before the end of the month for the workshop. Good to hear that. As you say, it's a really important opportunity to embed your learning and understanding, to consolidate what you know so far, to talk about the course materials, but also to talk about the follow-up exam. Okay. Okay, I'm getting some people. Okay, we're going back a little bit on some of the questions asking about the alternatives, but we are running out of time. I think this will close very quickly. So lots of people saying thank you. I'm hoping it's been a useful tutorial. I'm getting some feedback that it is. Thanks ever so much for your questions. That's made it more helpful. I'll say thanks ever so much. I won't be there in Dubai, I know someone's asked, but I will be here for some of you in Manchester. And I've got some excellent people on the tutor team that I know you're really going to enjoy meeting in your workshops, and you're fantastic teachers. Many thanks to everyone for participating. Slides will be available, as will the record of this. And so I'll say cheerio for now. Thanks for your participation, and good luck with the assignment. And I shall speak to you again in the later tutorial, and see some of you in due course too. Thanks ever so much. Cheerio.